Thank you for joining us with Family Basics 101. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ, located at 7800 Central Avenue in Landover, Maryland. Throughout the week, we've looked at tips for healthy relationships. Healthy relationships, are never an accident. So today, let's focus our time on tip number three, pre planning for relationships. Uh, have you ever heard the phrase all dressed up and nowhere to go? Or even better, I have somewhere to go, but nothing to wear. How often have you heard that? Oh, I have nothing to wear. And there's an entire closet of clothing, shoes. And yet, for that specific event, the individual will declare, I do have somewhere to go, but I have absolutely nothing to wear. Well, relationships require forethought, and forethought means thinking and planning before the relational opportunity arrives. No different than an event. It requires thinking ahead, it requires planning ahead. Well, what does that mean? In order for proper relationship planning to take place, it really requires assistance from someone other than the individual who is headed on the relationship journey. No child is born with the skills to properly care for itself. Those things have to be developed and nurtured. They require someone teaching them how to eat, someone teaching them how to walk, someone teaching them how to properly engage with both peers and adults. So you understand why I'm saying relationship planning requires assistance from someone other than the individual who is engaging the actual participant in the relationship. Now, relationship planning does not begin, as I've stated, with the identified individual or individuals, but with those individuals, those nurturers, those early care providers that are responsible for the global development, the all around developmental process of the entire person. Uh, Relationship grooming, relationship manners, relationship boundaries, relationship measurements. You may say, well, what does that mean? A person has to be groomed to be, and I'm talking about literally groomed. What type of relationship am I preparing for? Well, some other person has to help them learn to groom. If we're going to a outdoor sporting event and you're going to be participating, let's say in softball, or let's say in volleyball, well, you've got to teach the person the proper attire to wear. A little child may come out dressed for Sunday school, but it requires the adult to say, well, baby, the clothing that you have on is not suited for the event that you're going to. Uh, that's what I mean, relationship grooming. And that has to be taught to children. And then that moves with them throughout life. Relationship manners. Uh, Children don't just accidentally develop manners. Uh, in certain environments, certain manners must be practiced. Uh, my mother used to say, Look around, read the room, know your audience, and allow your manners to make sure they're commensurate with where you are. Uh, you come to someone's home, you don't just throw your shoes off and put your feet up on the sofa, do you? The homeowners may say, this child has not been taught proper manners. Uh, if you're seated at a dining room table and there are six people there for dinner, and there are six dinner rolls on the serving tray, proper manners would say, read the room. Take one dinner roll and not two. But we have to be taught those things as children in terms of relationship boundaries. We must be taught. There are certain rules that goes with specific relationships. Uh, as young men must understand there are boundaries to relationships with young ladies. But if young men aren't taught that, then young men will push beyond those relational boundaries. The same is true with young ladies. The relational boundaries must be taught early. And if they're not taught early, then how do we expect for our young ladies to really operate within those relationship boundaries? Uh, there are some relationship measurements. Uh, how do I know if I want to move forward with this relationship? How do I know how far I want to move ahead with this relationship? Uh, you've got to look at, this person may be just too worldly for me. Not necessarily a bad person, but this person is just too worldly. This person is too rude. Uh, I observe how he or she talks to family. I observe how he or she talks to friends, how he or she engages with other peers our age. This person may be too self centered. The world revolves around them. Is that a relationship that you want to move forward with? Well, it's hard to say unless there have been some planning before you're put into that relationship environment. Well, how do you plan? It's going to require proper training, proper teaching from someone that begins very early in teaching that child as that child matures. How do you measure proper relationships? Someone screaming and yelling at you, do you really want to be in a relationship like that? Someone pushing and shoving on you? But see, those boundaries, those relationship measures must be taught early. The person is abusive. If that child is not taught that you don't allow people to throw you around the room like a rag doll, you don't allow a person to put a knife to your throat and say, I could kill you. You don't allow a person to humiliate you in public, verbal abuse. Uh, See, we have to make sure that the planning for relationships begin very early in the process and not when the child is now in the playing field in the world of real life and they're trying to figure out, what do I do? Well, if they've planned correctly and if those involved in their lives have supported them correctly in the planning, then it becomes easier for the child who is now moving into adulthood or who is now in adulthood to say, no, I'm ready for this relationship. But being ready means I'm not going to participate in this relationship. Or being ready means, yes, I know how to approach this relationship. Relationship preparedness assistance is really biblical. As a matter of fact, it's expected. As a matter of fact, it's really commanded. In Proverbs 22, verses 1 through 6, choose a good reputation over great riches. Well, somebody has to teach that. Somebody has to assist in making sure that children, young adults, are taught this. Choose a good reputation over great riches. Being held in high esteem is better than silver or gold. The rich and the poor have this in common. The Lord made them both. In other words, you've got to prepare your children for adult relationships. This phrase, the rich and the poor have this in common. In other words, no matter how people excel financially with wealth, we must teach our children, yeah, but the rich and the poor still have something in common. Well, mom, dad, uncle, preacher, what is it? The Lord made all of them. You see, that gives a person value. And that helps a person not look down on himself or herself. Well, he's so beautiful. She's so this. And oh my goodness, look at her figure and look at his education and look at his job. Well, the rich and the poor still has this in common. The Lord made them all. That's how we prepare individuals for relationships. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. We have to teach our children. You've got to discern when an environment is not good for you. And you've got to plan ahead. You've got to think of ahead of time so that if this situation presents itself, you're prepared for it. Before cell phones, there were pay phones. And some of you may remember when a phone call was 10 cents. Well, maybe some of you remember when pay phones were 25 cents. I don't know. But this is what I can remember my mother and father always telling me. I would go out in an old car, an old 58 Chevrolet, but they would always tell me, whether it was a dime or a quarter, you keep this in your shoe. You put a dime in your shoe or a quarter in your shoe so that wherever you go, whatever happens, you get out of that environment and you make a phone call. You either call the police or you call someone that can come get you. That was, you foresee and you take precautions to mitigate. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. What happens if a child is not taught how to prepare for relationships? True humility and fear of the Lord leads to riches, honor, and long life. Unless we teach that, preparing, assisting, how do we expect for our young adults, our teens, to know that? Corrupt people walk on a thorny, treacherous road. Whoever values life will avoid it. Those are some of the hard teachings we've got to make sure take place, because young people are going to move into relationships. And we must let them know there are some people out there that just are corrupt. They're corrupt. They're not good people to be around. And then this is the path, this is verse 6 that we all know. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. Direct them onto it. I have a cousin, well, Cousin Henry is dead now, but he lived in Mississippi, and Cousin Henry was blind. But Cousin Henry would direct us to, he had a pond on his property, and we'd go down there to fish. So Cousin Henry would come out on the porch and he'd say, well, you see down the road, if you go down there, you'll see this and you'll see that. And when you get to this place, you turn. But he was blind. Here's what Cousin Henry was doing, he was directing us toward the right path. And if we got on that path, he understood there were rewards on that path. This is what the wise man is saying. Direct your children onto the path. Now, whether or not they get on it and stay or not initially, how soon they are willing to get on it, we don't know. But when they are older and they are trying to get into better relationships, they are trying to get out of danger, they're trying to get off that treacherous road, that's when they will say, there's a path out there that leads me to better relationships, to safer ground. And the reason I know there's a better path out there is because in early relationship development, it was taught to me. Let me encourage you to come back to class again tomorrow as we continue this theme in relationships. Very simplistic lessons, but yet very necessary lessons for life. Come tonight at 7 o'clock. We will begin our Wednesday night Bible devotion with just good singing. And then at 7:30, we will begin our Wednesday night Bible study. If you have an opportunity, read First Thessalonians before Bible class tonight. If I can't see you in class tonight, we'll see you back in class tomorrow. Don't be late and don't skip class. God bless you.